I never believed in ghosts. I never bought into the idea of spirits, demons, or whatever else people claim to experience in the dead of night. But what happened to me when I was 15 made me question everything I thought I knew. I don't tell this story often, and honestly, even now, I struggle to make sense of it. But I remember every detail, every sound, every heartbeat of terror as if it happened yesterday. It was a cold autumn night, and my mom and I had been watching some old crime show in her bedroom. I remember how tired she looked. She'd had a long shift at the hospital, and her exhaustion was catching up to her. I teased her about falling asleep mid-episode, but it didn't take long before I started dozing off myself. The TV hummed softly in the background, casting a bluish glow across the room. Outside, the wind rattled the bare branches against the windows. At some point I woke up. I wasn't sure what had stirred me, maybe a sound, maybe just instinct. The TV was still on, its volume now a soft murmur. Mom was next to me, sound asleep. The room was dark except for the flickering light from the screen, casting shifting shadows on the walls. And then I heard it. A voice, quiet but clear. "Mom's home." I froze. At first, I thought I had imagined it. Maybe it was a voice from the TV. But something about it didn't feel right. It was close. Too close. Like someone standing just outside the bedroom door. I turned my head slightly, my breath caught in my throat. The door was open just a crack, leading into the dark hallway. My heart pounded as I strained to listen. The house was silent. Then soft footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Moving across the wooden floor just outside the room. A cold sweat broke over me. My mom was right here, still breathing steadily beside me. If she was asleep, then who the hell had spoken? I wanted to wake her up, to shake her and tell her something was in the house. But I couldn't move. Every muscle in my body was locked in place. I kept my eyes on the doorway, my breath shallow, waiting, hoping. I was just half dreaming. The floor creaked again. This time, it was closer. I clenched the blanket in my fists, my mind racing. Maybe Dad had come home early? No, that wasn't possible. He was out of town for work. It was just Mom and me in the house tonight. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. I listened so hard my ears rang from the effort. Then the door creaked open. My stomach dropped. A sliver of the hallway was visible now, a yawning stretch of darkness beyond the frame. I swore I saw movement, just the faintest shift of a shadow. And then, a hand. Pale fingers curled around the edge of the doorframe. Just resting there. Not moving, not reaching, just there. Like something was waiting. Watching. I gasped, sucking in a sharp breath, and in that instant, the hand disappeared. The footsteps retreated, soft but hurried, moving away from the room, down the hall. I didn't think. I grabbed my mom's arm and shook her hard. "Mom!" My voice came out hoarse, panicked. She jerked awake, groggy and confused. "What? What's wrong?" "There's someone in the house," I whispered. My pulse was hammering so hard I thought my ribs would crack. She sat up immediately, her exhaustion gone in an instant. "What are you talking about?" I pointed at the doorway. It was open wider now, revealing more of the dark hallway. But there was nothing there. "I heard someone," I whispered. "They said Mom's home. And then I saw." I stopped myself. I didn't want to say it. The hand. The fingers. The way they had just rested there, waiting. Mom didn't waste time. She got up, flicked on the bedside lamp, and grabbed the baseball bat Dad kept by the nightstand. Her face was set, her exhaustion replaced by sharp, alert fear. She moved to the door, hesitated for a second, then yanked it open the rest of the way. The hallway was empty. Just darkness and silence. "Stay here," she whispered, and before I could protest, she stepped out. I heard her move down the hall, flicking on lights as she went. The living room. The kitchen. The front door, still locked. She checked every room, every closet. Nothing. When she came back, she looked shaken. "The house is empty," she said, but I could tell she didn't believe it. Not entirely. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I sat in bed, my back against the headboard, my eyes locked on the door. Every time the house creaked or the wind howled outside, I flinched. My mom sat up with me for a while, holding the bat in her lap, before exhaustion finally pulled her back under. But I stayed awake, waiting. In the morning, the terror of the night before felt surreal. Like a dream. But when I walked past the hallway, my stomach twisted. The spot where I had seen the hand, where those fingers had rested so unnaturally, was empty, but I could still see it in my mind. Too real. Too vivid. We never figured out what happened that night. I tried telling myself it had been a bad dream, sleep paralysis, an overactive imagination. But I know what I heard. I know what I saw. And to this day, every time I hear the words, "Mom's home," I feel a shiver crawl up my spine. I don't know why I took the picture. Maybe it was boredom, maybe it was to document the move, or maybe, somehow, I already knew something was wrong. Either way, I was sitting in my car outside my new house, staring up at it through my windshield, when I took the photo. Just a quick snapshot before heading inside. The house was empty. That much I was certain of. I had just signed the final paperwork that afternoon, and the place had been locked up tight since the last showing. No one had lived there for nearly 6 months. The previous owner, an elderly man, had passed away, and his family had been struggling to sell the place. It was a decent house. A little old, sure, but charming in a way. 2 stories, white siding with dark green shutters, and a wraparound porch. A real, forever home. At least, that's what I had told myself. I put my phone away, grabbed my keys, and stepped out of the car, the autumn air cool against my skin. As I walked up the front steps, my phone buzzed in my pocket. A notification from my photo gallery. I unlocked my phone without thinking and clicked on the picture. And that's when I saw it. In the second-story window, behind the glass, there was a face. My stomach dropped. My brain scrambled to make sense of what I was seeing. It wasn't a trick of the light. It wasn't a reflection. It was a person. Someone was inside my house. My first thought was that I had made a mistake. Maybe someone from the realtor's office had left a door unlocked. Maybe a squatter had found their way in. But even as I tried to rationalize it, a deeper, more primal part of me was screaming that something was horribly, horribly wrong. I squinted at the image, my pulse pounding in my ears. The figure in the window was pale, unnaturally so, with dark, hollow eyes. The mouth was slightly open, as if mid-breath or mid-whisper. The longer I stared, the more I realized that the person's features were off. Blurred, like an old photograph left out in the rain. I looked up at the window in real life. It was empty. I swallowed hard and took a step back. My first instinct was to call the police, but what would I even say? That I took a photo of my new house and there was someone in the window, but now they weren't there? I doubted that would warrant an urgent response. Instead, I circled the house, checking every door and window. All locked. No signs of forced entry. No footprints in the dust on the porch. I even peered through the first-floor windows, but everything inside was exactly as it had been during my final walk-through. Empty. I should have left. I should have gotten back in my car and driven away. But I didn't. Maybe it was denial, maybe it was exhaustion from the long day, but I convinced myself that I had imagined it. That I had seen something that wasn't really there. So I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The air smelled stale. The house was quiet, too quiet. My footsteps echoed in the emptiness. I walked through each room, turning on lights as I went. Living room, kitchen, downstairs bathroom. Everything was as it should be. Then I made my way upstairs. The hallway stretched before me, lined with closed doors. My phone was still in my hand, and despite every nerve in my body screaming not to, I lifted it and snapped another picture. I don't know why. Maybe I needed to prove to myself that the first image had been a mistake. Maybe I just wanted to see. I lowered the phone and checked the screen. There it was again. At the end of the hallway, just outside the last bedroom, stood the figure. Closer now. Still blurred. Still wrong. I dropped my phone. The sound of it hitting the floor snapped me out of my paralysis, and I turned on my heel, bolting back down the stairs. My heart was in my throat as I ran out the front door and into the night air. I didn't stop running until I reached my car. Hands shaking, I fumbled with my keys, barely able to get the door unlocked. Once inside, I locked the doors and started the engine. My breath came in short, panicked bursts. I picked up my phone from where it had landed in the grass, the screen cracked but still functioning. My gallery was still open, the image of the hallway still displayed. The figure was gone. I sat there for what felt like hours, staring at my house, waiting. Watching. But nothing happened. No movement in the windows, no shifting shadows. Eventually, I forced myself to breathe. To think. Maybe it had been a trick of my eyes. A distortion in the lens. Something, anything, that could explain what I had seen. Finally, against all reason, I went back inside. The house was empty. That night I barely slept. Every sound, every creak of the old house, had me lying rigid in bed, clutching my phone like a lifeline. But nothing happened. The next morning, in the harsh light of day, it almost felt silly. Almost. But there's one thing I haven't told anyone. One thing that keeps me awake at night, even now. A few days later, while unpacking, I found an old, faded photograph tucked away in a kitchen drawer. A family portrait. It must have belonged to the previous owner. An elderly man, his wife, and their son. The son's face was blurred, as if the ink had been smeared. And he was staring straight at me. I was at work when I got the text. Don't come home. It was from my brother Jake. At first, I thought it was a joke. Maybe he was messing with me. He had a dry sense of humor and liked to stir up paranoia. But something about it didn't sit right. The text had come through with no follow-up, no explanation. I called him immediately. No answer. I tried again. Straight to voicemail. I stared at my phone, a gnawing sense of unease creeping up my spine. I was supposed to be home in 2 hours. Was this some kind of warning? A prank? Or was something really wrong? I texted back, "What the hell does that mean?" No response. I started pacing in the break room. My shift at the auto shop wasn't quite over, but I couldn't focus on anything else. Something about the whole situation felt wrong. I called home. My parents didn't answer. They were usually home at this hour, especially my dad. I tried my mom's cell. Voicemail. I texted both of them, then my sister, then my cousin who lived down the street. Nothing. By now, my hands were shaking. Something was really wrong. I made up some excuse to my boss and left work early. The entire drive home, I kept my phone in my lap, glancing at it every few seconds, hoping for a reply from someone, anyone. The closer I got to my neighborhood, the heavier the air felt. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. The moment I turned onto our street, I knew something was off. All the lights in my house were off. That never happened. My mom always left the porch light on. Even when no one was home, at least one light inside was on. But the house was completely dark, like an abandoned shell. And Jake's car was gone. I pulled into the driveway, my stomach knotting. I hesitated before turning off my engine. My brother told me not to come home. But why? I sat there for a long minute, just staring at the house, at the darkened windows that seemed to watch me back. My heart was hammering in my chest. I picked up my phone and called Jake again. Still nothing. Then, against all my instincts, I got out of the car. The air was too still. Even though it was a summer night, the usual sounds of cicadas and distant cars were gone. The street was eerily silent. I approached the front door cautiously, my keys clutched so tightly in my fist that the metal dug into my palm. I unlocked the door, pushed it open, and stepped inside. The house smelled wrong. A heavy, metallic scent filled the air, coppery and thick. It was mixed with something else, something rotten. My stomach churned. "Mom?" I called. "Dad?" No answer. I flipped the light switch. Nothing. The power was out. A faint noise came from upstairs. A creak. Like someone shifting their weight on the floorboards. My whole body locked up. Every instinct screamed at me to get out. But I moved forward, one step at a time, breathing shallowly as I reached the base of the stairs. I pulled out my phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam of light flickered across the walls as I slowly ascended. The closer I got to the top, the stronger the smell became. I swallowed down the rising bile in my throat. I reached the hallway. My parents' bedroom door was open. My sister's door, too. Something dripped onto my shoulder. I froze. Slowly, I raised my phone, angling the light toward the ceiling. There was a hand. A human hand, limp and pale, dangling from the attic entrance. I stumbled back, gasping, my stomach twisting violently. My vision swam as I whipped around and bolted for the stairs. My foot barely touched the first step when I heard it. A scraping sound. Coming from the attic. A shuffling. Something moving. Something aware of me. I sprinted. My body was running before my mind even caught up. I hit the front door, flung it open, and ran straight to my car. I fumbled with my keys, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped them. I managed to unlock the door, jump inside, and slam it shut just as I heard the attic hatch creak open. I didn't wait to see what came out. I floored the gas pedal and sped down the street, my breath coming in ragged gasps. My vision blurred with panic. I didn't slow down until I was miles away, parked in an empty lot, my hands still gripping the steering wheel so hard they ached. I sat there, staring at my phone, my entire body trembling. I opened my messages and stared at the last thing my brother had sent me. "Don't come home." I never heard from my family again. The police searched the house the next day. They found blood, but no bodies. No sign of forced entry. No explanation. My brother's car was found abandoned 5 miles away, the keys still in the ignition. They never found him either. The case remains open. But I know one thing for certain. Something was in that house. And it's still there. I never believed in the supernatural. I always figured ghosts, hauntings, and all that eerie nonsense were just people scaring themselves. But over the past few months, something has happened in my home that I can't explain. And the worst part? My cat, my sweet, affectionate tabby, Murphy, knows it too. Murphy and I have been inseparable since I adopted him as a kitten. He follows me from room to room, curls up in my lap, and sleeps on my bed every night. Or at least he used to. About 3 months ago, that changed. At first, it was subtle. He would hesitate at the threshold of my bedroom, his ears flicking back as if he heard something I couldn't. Then he started sitting in the hallway outside my door, staring inside, tail flicking, pupils wide with something that looked a lot like fear. I thought it was a phase, maybe something about my new laundry detergent, or a smell he didn't like. But then, the real change happened. He stopped coming into my room altogether. I'd call him, pat my bed, shake the treat bag, but Murphy wouldn't budge. He'd just sit there, staring at me with those unblinking green eyes, his body rigid. If I tried to pick him up and bring him inside, he'd claw at me and scramble out of my arms like his life depended on it. That's when I started noticing other things. It began with small noises. A faint scratching against the walls late at night. At first, I chalked it up to mice, but I never found any droppings or signs of an infestation. Then came the knocking. 3 sharp raps against my closet door. I live alone. The first time it happened, I was half asleep and convinced I dreamed it. But the next night, it came again. And the night after that. Always 3 knocks. Always from inside the closet. I tried to rationalize it. Pipes expanding? Some weird structural noise I'd never noticed before? I even checked inside the closet, moving aside clothes and boxes, but there was nothing there. Murphy knew, though. Every night, he sat outside my bedroom door, staring, his tail twitching anxiously. The moment the knock started, his ears would flatten, and he'd slink away, as if whatever was in my room could reach him even in the hallway. Then, things got worse. One night, I woke up freezing. I keep my windows shut and my AC off at night, so there was no reason for the room to be so cold. My breath misted in the air, and an unbearable feeling of dread settled over me, like I wasn't alone. I turned over, hard hammering, and my closet door was wide open. I swore I'd shut it before bed. I always do. Something was different about the room. The air felt heavier, like it was pressing down on me. My sheets felt damp with sweat, and the knocking, those awful, deliberate 3 knocks, started up again. Except this time, it wasn't coming from inside the closet. It was coming from under my bed. I froze, my entire body rigid. The knocking was slow, deliberate. It almost felt playful. Murphy was long gone. I could hear him yowling from the living room, a deep, guttural sound I had never heard from him before. My instincts screamed at me to run, but some sick, twisted curiosity made me lean over the side of my bed, peering into the darkness below. I wish I hadn't. Something was there. Not a mouse, not a pile of forgotten clothes. Something pale, with elongated fingers and nails that scratched lightly against the wooden floor. Its face, if I could even call it that, was just a shadow, but I swear I saw something shift. A grin? I shot upright, heart in my throat. I didn't move for what felt like hours, just listening, waiting. Eventually, the knocking stopped. The weight in the air lifted, the temperature returned to normal, and my closet door, somehow, was shut again. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, Murphy refused to come anywhere near my bedroom. He wouldn't even look inside. That was when I decided I couldn't ignore it anymore. I started researching, looking up local legends, anything that might explain what was happening. I even reached out to an online forum for paranormal experiences. Most people suggested I move. Some told me to burn sage. A few said I should never, under any circumstances, acknowledge it. I tried everything. I burned sage. I placed salt along the doorway. I even got a priest to bless the apartment. Nothing worked. Murphy has officially claimed the couch as his sleeping spot. If I try to carry him into my bedroom, he fights me like a wild animal, clawing and hissing. I still hear the knocking. It doesn't happen every night, but often enough that I dread going to sleep. Sometimes it's in the closet. Sometimes under the bed. Once, it was directly against the headboard. I don't know what it wants. I don't know why it's here. But Murphy does. And whatever it is, it's enough to make him abandon me every night. I don't blame him. I just wish I could do the same. I grew up in a small town in Montana, where the nights were long and the woods stretched for miles in every direction. It was the kind of place where the silence at night could almost deafen you, except for the occasional rustling of trees in the wind or the distant howl of a coyote. My grandmother used to tell me stories about the old superstitions of our town, but there was one in particular that always stuck with me. "Never whistle at night," she warned. "If you do, something might whistle back. And if you answer, it'll come for you." I never put much stock in those tales. They were just stories to keep kids from wandering into the woods after dark. At least, that's what I thought. It happened on a chilly autumn night when I was home from college visiting my parents. I was sitting out on the back porch, enjoying the crisp air, when I heard it. A whistle, clear and high-pitched, coming from the tree line at the edge of our property. I glanced around, thinking maybe it was my dad playing a trick on me. But the house was dark. Everyone had already gone to bed. The whistle came again, the exact same tune. It wasn't a song I recognized, just a few simple notes carried on the wind. I hesitated, then smirked to myself. What was the harm? I pursed my lips and whistled back, mimicking the tune. Silence. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, just as I was about to brush it off and head inside, I heard it. The whistle again, but this time, it was closer. A shiver ran down my spine. It wasn't just that it had moved. It was the way it sounded, slightly off, like someone trying to imitate a whistle but failing, their breath catching in the middle of the notes. I told myself it was just an echo, maybe the wind carrying the sound. But something about it felt wrong. I stood up, rubbing my arms against the cold, and stepped back toward the house. Before I reached the door, another whistle rang out, this time from the other side of the yard. Whatever it was, it had moved fast. Too fast. I slammed the door shut behind me, locked it, and pulled the curtains closed. I didn't sleep well that night. The next night, I told myself I was being ridiculous. The wind could do strange things in the woods. Maybe it had been an animal. So, despite the unease still gnawing at my stomach, I went out onto the porch again. I didn't have to wait long. The whistle came, clear and deliberate, from the same spot as before. I didn't answer this time. I just sat there, my breath slow and steady, straining to hear anything else. The night was still. Too still. Even the usual sounds, the chirping of crickets, the rustling of leaves, had vanished. Then, from the darkness, something moved. Not footsteps, exactly. More like a shifting, a presence creeping closer without sound. I peered into the dark, but the porch light barely reached past the first few feet of grass. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. And then, just beyond the tree-line, I saw something. A figure. Tall and thin, its outline barely distinguishable against the blackness of the woods. It stood unnaturally still, and though I couldn't see its face, I could feel its eyes on me. It raised a hand to its mouth, and whistled. I bolted inside, locked every door and window, and sat awake until dawn, listening. The whistling continued for hours, moving around the house, always just out of sight. Sometimes it was close. Other times it was distant. But it never stopped. Until the sun came up. By the third night, I was exhausted but too afraid to leave. My parents thought I was imagining things. My dad even went out with his shotgun but found nothing. But I knew it was real. That night I stayed inside. I kept the lights on, the curtains drawn. Midnight came, and I held my breath, waiting. Then, right outside my bedroom window, the whistle came again. Slow. Deliberate. Almost playful. I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed a flashlight, and against every instinct, pulled back the curtain. There, inches from the glass, was a face. It wasn't human. The skin was stretched too tight, the mouth too wide. Its eyes were hollow, dark pits that seemed to go on forever. And then it grinned, sharp teeth gleaming in the light. I staggered back, knocking over my nightstand. When I looked up again, it was gone. The whistling faded into the distance. The next morning, I packed my bags and left. I haven't been back since.
What was meant to be, it came to stay. Some found love, some lost their way. One got the wine, the other the pain. One walked alone in the pouring rain.
I'm just a tale of a broken heart, pieces scattered far apart. In the silence of the night we weep, secrets buried far too deep.
When the sun sets low and shadows fall, we remember it all, every rise and fall. What was meant to be, we often see in dreams that are lost to eternity.
Whispers of the past dance in the air, echoes of a time we used to care. Every laugh, every tear we shared, each broken promise we declared. Whispers of the past dance in the air, echoes of a time we used to care. Every laugh, every tear we shared, each broken promise we declared. The story's been written, no looking back.